you so much for joining me on the Creative Awakening Now podcast. I'm your host, David Matters, and I'm here to bring you stories, interviews, and insights relating to the topics of creativity, inspiration, and practice. My intention is to connect with other people who employ a heart-centered approach to the artistic process and to share this profoundly inspiring content with anyone who cares to hear it. I hope you enjoy. This is a dream, and a dream is never the same. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me once again on the Creative Awakening Now podcast. This week, I am actually going to do something a little bit different with this episode. There's a couple reasons for it. One, because I just have so much going on that it's been really insane trying to actually keep up with things and keep it rolling without having to book guests out much in advance, and had some cancellations and things. So I had some free time this week to actually do something that I've been wanting to do for a while. From the beginning of this show, I wanted to set aside a couple episodes every now and then to demonstrate kind of what I'm talking about through all this. It's easy enough to interview people, and it's easy enough to talk about it. You could put the idea of creativity out there, or practice out there, but until you're actually doing it, it doesn't really have any real weight to it. And not that this is going to have a whole ton of weight to it, but I'm going to do my best. I wanted just to kind of just share some things in a couple of these episodes as things come up. Maybe I'll share a song or some poetry, or I was thinking about reading some of my writings. This week I'm going to read some of my blog posts and talk about it and kind of give a little bit of a synthesis of what I have kind of gleaned from all these conversations. And, this is episode 22 now, I believe, which is so awesome. I'm so excited that it's gone this far, and I've had so many great guests on, and I felt like it was a really good time to reflect and to come back to what it is that I've been trying to put across with this whole thing, or at least trying to bring up in other people, because I've had some really awesome individuals come on who have really embodied everything that Creative Awakening Now is supposed to be. And I thought I would just kind of bring some of that to the light, and then share some of my writing to kind of express that and maybe riff on that too. So hopefully that's cool with you. I mean, it's my show. I've been wanting to do different things and branch out and keep it fresh and keep it original. So this is something I want to do, and hopefully people enjoy it. But so yeah, I think one of the first things I want to talk about is the overall feeling of what I'm getting through a lot of these conversations, because a lot of it is about creativity, obviously, and practice in different forms, but it also has a deeper relationship to life. The whole thing, all the conversations that I have are more about the process behind it all, more about the experience of creativity than it is just about the product, which the product is clearly part of it too. Especially with music, I love bringing musicians on and being able to share that ingrained into it. But what is behind it all is really the important thing. And a couple things that I've taken away from these interviews. Number one, I think, being the level of dedication and passion that people have for their specific outlet of creative outlet. And everyone has a different way of saying it, but there's this sense of knowing and confidence in the creative process that if you don't encounter that and you don't embody it in your own practice, it seems most people have a really hard time connecting. Maybe it's a hobby you have, or something that you do, or a project that you undertake, but if you don't have that, it's almost like this calling, like this real sense of direction and drive towards what it is. And if you don't have that, oftentimes whatever your project is doesn't really manifest. It doesn't come together, because life takes over, and life very often does take over. It's the modern world is insanely busy. We're all insanely busy. Everything we do is kind of scheduled. We put it in there and we try and make it work. The creative aspects and the really expressive aspects, we try and squeeze it in the spaces that exist between our everyday life, and that's fine. That's just the way life is. But if you don't have a real drive to fulfill that and to give space to those processes, it never comes to fruition. And there's lots of people out there who can attest to that. Like, they have these great ideas, and at one time they found this deep passion for something, but it fell away, and they just can't really figure out why they didn't see it come to fruition. And that's one thing that a lot of guests share that has really stuck out to me, that the calling has to be there. Your connection to whatever it is you're doing really has to be there, because it's the fuel for the fire that is your creative experience. The song that you're writing, or the poem, or the tattoo, or whatever it is you're doing. And I can attest to that personally, and I love sharing that about things where it's like, with honesty out on the table here, it's like we all struggle with doing these things, even though we're very committed. I've been playing music and doing creative things most of my life. Even when I was a young kid, it was just before it came out in any real tangible way. It was coming out in silly poems, or just different interactions that I had with the natural world, and creativity was there. But it's a deeper kind of thing that we have to connect with. And if you don't, it's hard to keep up with. And I've had these periods that I go through where I put in all my effort and all this energy into bringing it to life, bringing my songs out, bringing my writing out, and it'll drop away for periods, and it's very hard to deal with as a creative person. You just want it to come back. You want it to be thriving, because that's when you feel the most alive. And I know for me, when I'm creating something, when I'm writing a song, or I'm blogging, or doing these podcasts, or doing some of my pyrography stuff, wood burning, when you're really in it and that energy takes over, it's so effortless, and it just kind of comes out, and it feels so good. It feels so natural. It's like this piece of you that always wanted to be there. And when it doesn't come out, it's really hard to deal with. So, those periods do exist for all of us, but the passion is where that really comes into play, the real drive. Because just because a couple days go by, or a week go by, or even a couple months go by, that you don't have this surging spark that's there underneath it all, just because you don't feel it, doesn't mean you give up on it. You don't just let it go. Just stop playing. That it's not even an option for people who are truly dedicated. So that's a really powerful point that I like to put out there as a synthesis from what other people have said in my own experience, because it's I think that maybe is one of the most essential elements, is knowing that times are going to get rough, and that the inspiration won't always be there, the content won't always be there, or you'll be too busy. And the real practice comes in when you have to kind of just pick yourself back up and get back on track and start from where you are, and not worry about past results or feelings, just working from where you are and being committed to picking it back up. So there's that. Another thing that I really wanted to talk about is this, I ask people where their inspiration comes from a lot of time. Where does the energy that drives them come, and what kind of practices can regenerate that and help to continue it along. And a lot of almost unanimously, most people have said in one version or another that connecting with nature and just slowing down and allowing the space of stillness and silence to kind of permeate what they do. And I find that when you get into these states and you go deep enough into it, it kind of washes the slate clean. You let go of, like I said, those times there were rough patches or dry spells, and you let go of the other stuff in the past that you're always trying to recreate, and you become present for what is right there. And somehow the natural world allows that in a much deeper way than, say, sitting in the middle of the city or in a busy restaurant or something. The natural world kind of fuels that. And if you have any kind of meditative practice, especially, it's that same kind of idea where it doesn't have to be out in the natural world, but in a silent, still, healthy environment, to just slow down and to reconnect. And you don't have to call it formal meditation or anything. You just call it, creating space and allowing the inherent silence that we all kind of rest in to come to the surface and to really dwell in that place. And like I said, let it wash the slate clean. And there's something to be said about actually being in the physical world when doing this, and out on a hike or in a lake, or rafting or canoeing, any of these kind of things that you're really hands-on with the earth. It really does have some kind of effect that I find is really inspiring. It allows you to let go and to open up to the deeper places inside you that usually are kind of pushed back, pushed down a little bit by the fast-paced world. So there's that. And I think that I want to actually share a little bit about, not exactly on that topic, but this blog post that I recently shared on my website was written from a quote from Suzuki Roshi, a Zen teacher, a modern Zen teacher, and he's written a lot of books, obviously, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and he didn't write it actually. It was he hasn't written any books now I think of it. Those were Dharma talks that he gave that were transcribed, but he has a couple of them. He doesn't even have a lot, but he was very prolific in what he had to say and share, and it was it affected our culture a lot in the Zen tradition and the Buddhist tradition. What he had to say, a lot of it was very simple and very pragmatic, and nothing like mystical about it, nothing crazy out there, but there was just something deep in the simplicity of it. And this blog post that I wrote came out of that, and it is connected with what I was just saying. That's why I want to share it in the way that I think that a lot of the times the space of meditation affords us, or the natural world affords us, it reminds us that the simple things in life, just being alive and being connected to such beauty and such magic. The way that the world works is just absolutely incredible, but we forget that so easily because there's so many other distractions, and you forget that just being here is all that is really, that's all that really matters at the end of the day. You just sit down, sit on the grass, and look up at the sunset, and there's this sense of peace that comes over most people. I don't want to make it a blanket statement, but it's that kind of thing where you just take a minute and just breathe, and it sets you straight again. And so this comes out of that. And this was, a couple weeks ago when I posted it, but it says, I recently heard a story about a teaching that the well-known Zen master Suzuki Roshi shared with one of his students. The teaching was incredibly simple and was contained within a single phrase, but the profundity was not lost to the student, nor to me, just because of its simplicity. What he said was, just to be alive is enough. The context of this statement was lost to the retelling, but I honestly don't think it matters. There is so much power packed into this tiny lesson that it's hard to believe 6 letters can even hold it. The idea that the basic act of living is just as important and fulfilling as success or fame or respect is mind-blowing to most of us. We are so conditioned to want to achieve things and to make a name for ourselves that we often feel like failures if we aren't recognized and acknowledged. Society tells us that we are either stars or we are nothing, and that our level of happiness will be reflected by which side we stand on. But Suzuki Roshi shattered this idea to pieces when he shared this little nugget of wisdom. There are many situations that this statement can be applied to, but for me, I immediately associated it with creativity. It made me question my motivation as well as my approach to what I do. After all, I believe what he said. I believe it deep in my bones, but most of the time, especially when it comes to my art, I forget. So I have to ask myself, if I believed that simply being alive was enough, wouldn't I be more patient with my writer's block or my stagnant periods? Wouldn't I be more focused on my love for the process of expression than on the expectation of results? Wouldn't I put all of my energy into joy and gratitude instead of desire and self-loathing? One would think so. But we as creative people have such a hard time being content with what is. We are always looking for the next hit of inspiration or the next opportunity for recognition. So many of us are placing our peace and happiness in the unsteady hands of the future instead of placing them at our feet and moving forward with their guidance. So that's, I already explained why I wanted to share that, but it's something that's really been on my mind a lot lately with my creative endeavors in general. It's just I and a lot of people I know put a lot of focus on results and destinations, expectations and getting things out of what we're doing and, producing things. It's what our world's all about. We're content providers. We want to produce results and we want to have something to show for it. And that's all well and good in a certain sense, but ultimately that's not why we practice, I don't think. We practice because we love it and that we are deeply connected with it, and in some way it reflects who we really are. It's an expression of who we really are, and the simple moments of just letting the creative energy out, and in whatever form that is. When you're cooking a meal and really loving what you're doing and really connected to it, or you're writing a song or playing a song or painting a picture or writing a blog post, whatever it is, when you're really engaged in it and you're not doing it just because you want to gain something from it, because it's another thing you have to do, or because you haven't written a song in a couple of months, you really need to write a new one. The record label's knocking at the door, or whatever it is. When you step back from it and you look at it in its real, raw, ultimate sense, that's not good motivation for creativity. It's not sustainable. It eventually is going to burn you out. You're going to get frustrated, and this is my experience anyway. And the idea that just to be alive is enough. I feel like when I thought about that and heard it and put it in context to my life, it really just shifted something in me when I was like, that's the space that I always want to create from. And sometimes I do, but most often I don't. It's what I long for, but I don't. It's hard to reach that space all the time, because another thing with time, you got to squeeze it in when you can. So when inspiration strikes, it's great, but when it doesn't, you feel like you have to push things through. And if I approach my art from that place of, well, I'm here, and that's enough. That's all that really matters. And if I can express something from that place, express my gratitude for that experience, or express a true observation of the world, whether it's beautiful or hideous, it's to capture that in words or in painting or in song is really powerful, and to share that with people. And almost always, in my experience, when you create from that place, it does translate, and people, they really connect on a deeper way. It's something about the intention of it creates resonance, and other people connect with it. That's really the only way I can put it. And they just sense the authenticity, and they get it. And because of that, it becomes something they appreciate, and they really see as a good product, and it's not even by intention. It's not because you wanted to create a good product. They recognize it as that because it was an authentic product. And authenticity is another thing that comes up a lot on my show, where it's people talking about how to create consistently and how to create good things that really has heart in it. And this is both for creative practices and for spiritual practice. For a lot of people that come on my show, they have a spiritual connection in their own way, religious or otherwise. And authenticity is kind of the hinge pin of it, where it's like, as long as you're being true to yourself, as long as you're really pulling something out of direct experience, not just jumbling some words together or mashing some colors onto a canvas just because, if you're really doing it from a deeper felt sense in you, something unique comes out of that space almost all the time. And it takes a lot of practice just to get to that point, obviously. But when you get there, it has an energy of its own that it fuels more. It's just this natural progression that happens, and it comes out of simplicity oftentimes. It comes out of just being honest with who you are and not trying to build it up, not trying to tell a story that isn't yours. It's just being authentic. If my life is shit, and I want to share that with people, I share it with people authentically, and somehow that can create something really beautiful that other people connect with in a way they're like, yeah, that sounds sad and terrible, but it makes me feel like I'm not alone in the world, something like that. And that's a very powerful thing. And oftentimes through authentic living, and I think of this in spiritual practice too, like especially with my practice with meditation and in the Zen tradition largely, you just can't fake it. You have to start from where you are. Like, there's no shortcuts in life. There's no ways around the mountain. You have to just huck on up over it and, pitch your tent along the way. And every morning, start fresh, go from there. And if you do that and you just keep starting from the place you are and you keep going, eventually you make it over the mountain. And that is, I think, when deep insights come about and realizations come about. And that's where inspiration comes from. It's, you got to push through and push through and push through. And it sounds, it sounds unpleasant sometimes. It's a little bit chafing to some people. And it is. Anyone who's been a serious artist for long enough knows that there are times where it's seriously painful, emotionally, financially, spiritually, and otherwise. It can be very painful, but there are these brief moments that come about that are just truly inspiring, truly, moments of awakening, if you will. And which brings me up to this other post that I wanted to share. And as I said before, I want to share these not only because of what's in them, but because it's an expression of my creativity, my practice. I talk about it with people a lot, but being able to share my writing, this is a physical expression. I'm walking the walk with this and not just talking about it. And it's not much, I'm not saying this is some fantastic piece of poetry or a magnificent composition. This is just my thoughts, but it's coming out of a place of true creativity. So yeah, that's why I'm reading these, but you can always go to my website and read them through if you want, but it's not, I don't have much experience with marketing for myself, and so I know that there's not a whole lot of contact with what I write outside of the people that I read it to. So hopefully if you're listening, you get a little taste and maybe you'll go check out some more. But this is something that I wrote recently, and this is more of a poem, and it was about that exact thing where it's kind of a realization that I had, and it was just very simple thing that it came out of this struggle that I was having. And I can't really explain the struggle. It was more of like a existential struggle. Maybe it was more on the spiritual level. I'm not even really sure. It's hard to explain, but it had been on my mind for a while, and then some kind of life event took place, and this realization came out of it. This very simple understanding that was so profound to me in that moment. Somebody could say the essence of this in one sentence, and it's cute. It's it's maybe cliche, whatever it is, but the real connection that I had with it in that moment was profound, and so it came out like this. And I'll share that for you with you. I think I just saw something, like the fluttering of an insect as it passed through the very edge of my sight. It graced my periphery and then vanished into the ether. It was here quite clearly, and even though it's now gone, its outline still lingers in the memory of my experience. It was brief, but I honestly think I just got the answer to one of my deepest, most complicated questions, and the answer is so unbelievably simple that I don't even know if I can accept it. It is truly beyond words. Not because it's mystical or profound in any way, but because the necessary words can't convey the truth they are hinting at. the truth about the original perfection that has always been present, the truth that screams, we are just fine. Nothing has ever been wrong at all. It's all just an illusion. Our awakening is just the acceptance of what is right in front of us, without flinching or wincing at the sight of blemishes or bald spots. In fact, the real nectar of this wisdom is contained within those perfect imperfections. Words can't do it justice, because the answer isn't a word or a sentence. It is an understanding. But even an understanding isn't enough, because understanding alone lacks action. The key to action is embedded within the donning of a new cloak, one that is totally exposed, but which covers the whole of our being. This is the mark of the awakened state. Being clothed in our nakedness, feeling whole in our skin, and accepting who and what we currently are, without lending so much as a glance to the distant horizon. This is what makes the great masters so unmistakably great. They are who they are, and they aren't afraid to shine with that remarkably unremarkable light. They start from the place they are sitting, and they practice, not with the confidence of a recognized saint or with the eyes of a gifted seer. They simply practice because that's all there is to do. They practice because what they have always been. They practice because what they have always been, and so effortlessly becomes the norm. They practice being what they have always been, and so effortlessly becomes the norm. They remember that it's all okay. They acknowledge that the world is in fact not at all okay, but they remember that deep inside its core, within its very essence, this life is perfect just the way it is. We are perfect just the way we are, and there is actually no difference between the two. But even beyond all that, the real illumination seems to come from the taking up of the challenge of not knowing and still showing up to guide others along the path. Not through proselytizing or preaching, but through living. By choosing to embody the practice in each new moment and resolving to learn from our mistakes instead of judging ourselves for them, we become the perfect manifestation of awakened living. Even when we don't know, just by accepting the not knowing and integrating that spaciousness, we are still teaching. This isn't to say this is the whole story, or that there aren't deeper levels of realization. This is just to say that everything else seems to stem from this kind of resolve. Just getting here takes an immense amount of effort, and I'm not saying I've paddled my way safely to the shore, but I think I might see the outline of its greatest peaks in the glow of this flickering realization. So, sorry for my stumbling upon the words there. Hopefully you got the gist of it, but I wanted to do this all live and on the spot, so that's just what it is. But yeah, it was a very real, authentic expression that came through me, just from that kind of, that exact thing that I was talking about, just kind of pushing through the tough times, and really sitting with these questions. And it's in my practice, in my Zazen practice, I have, if you know nothing about Zen, it may not make any sense, but there is a certain level of questioning, the serious doubt that goes on in the practice that people talk about, and you can read it in books and stuff, but it's hard to really understand until you experience this sense of great doubt. I don't really have words for it, and I don't want to get too deep into it because I'm not proclaiming that I have the answer, but that feeling that's what I had that made this kind of understanding come about, that really that the real epiphany, the real sense of feeling of being awake in life is being honest, being exactly who you are right where you are, and starting from there every single moment. And if you can genuinely live from that place, some really amazing things can be born out of it. It's the creative process in action in your life, I think, when you give it space and you allow it to simmer, whatever it is. And, in this situation, it was a difficult mind state that I had about my practice and busyness and spirituality and all these things wrapped up into one gnarly little ball that I couldn't quite digest. And it was confusing. I didn't know where I stood for it was for a moment, really, just have these things maybe it was a couple days I was thinking about it, but it kind of broke through. And when I came out, that's, this creative expression came through. And like I said, I'm not touting it as some fantastic piece of literature, but it is a very genuine thing that for me, I didn't have to put any effort into it. It was purely effortless because I had the energy of this passion, this confidence that was born of that great doubt. That it was like, it pushed me on through it, and I didn't even have to try. It just happened, naturally unfolding. And that's a huge thing that I think the creative process is all about, is getting into that state in your life and allowing it to take over. And when it does, some cool things come from it. But anyway, there's a lot more stuff that I could go into, but I wanted to keep this somewhat short. 30 minutes is not exactly short, but I think that's about what I've been talking now. But I wanted to just touch base and share a little bit about what I'm doing and talk about my feelings about the guests that I've had on and some of the subjects that have come out. And that's a little taste of that. So I hope that was cool with you guys. I would like to do more of these kind of things in the future. Like I said, maybe sharing some songs and different things periodically in between my interviews, because the interviews are really what it's about. It's not about my stuff. But I want it to not be about my stuff either. I want it to be an action, me showing that I'm doing these things and expressing that. So I hope you can understand all that. And as I said before, forgive all my ramblings and stumbling on words and all this. I hope you kind of glean some of what I'm trying to say through it all. And I believe you can. I believe you will. I know that people who listen to this are going to have an understanding about these kind of things. And that's why else would you listen to it? So thank you for indulging me. Thank you for listening. And I hope that gives you something to think about. It's something to ponder and put into your own practices, hopefully. And yeah, just stay tuned, and maybe in the future I'll bring some more of this kind of stuff out. And if you have any input or feedback, I'd love to hear it. As always, it'd be great if you could share some feedback on iTunes, anything like that. Reviews, ratings, share it with some friends. It's immensely helpful. So that's that. I'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for listening.